Hey. Good morning. Enthusiastic crowd for a software agent. I have to say that's not the usual response. But looking forward to talking about some of the exciting stuff that we've been able to do at New York Life with the Edge agent. We got a clicker issue here. There we go. So let's get right into it. We'll do some quick intro, talk about some of the challenges that we have at the scale at which we operate, some of the cool things we've been able to do with Cribl Edge, and the most exciting part, what our architecture looks like before and after doing this. Cribl Edge is a really unique feature of Cribl. In my Cribl travels, if you will, I don't find that it's as well adopted as Stream. Typically, most of the customers you run into, at least I run into, are big, heavy Stream shops. But maybe because of the prevalence of Splunk or other things, the Edge agent hasn't been as well deployed. We have been on a pretty exciting journey to do this in a relatively short period of time. Before we get into the exciting stuff, though, allow me to introduce myself quickly. My name is Sal Peter. I lead all the threat detection, security data platform engineering for New York Life Insurance. We're a very big, very old company, so we have an incredibly diverse ecosystem of technology. The people who presented right before were talking about, experience with mainframe and everything. Like, we have the works. We have mainframe. We have AS400. We have Kubernetes. We have every possible thing you can think of, in every possible thing you can think to deploy it. And collecting logs at that scale becomes incredibly difficult. Talking about the difficulties of this, let's get right into it. We have in our environment around 8,500 servers and containers. And when you have that many of anything, managing it just becomes incredibly difficult, incredibly error prone, and there are many people involved. So from my side of the tower in security, historically we were always consumers of the enterprise log management tools, and basically we were stuck with what was provided to us with no control over what security data arrives at our SIEM, and no control over the timelines and other things associated with onboarding new data. This is bad for a lot of reasons, obviously, right? In security, we don't usually know what we need 100% of the time. In fact, I can tell you with confidence, I never know 100% of what I need in security, and it's usually, oh my God, there's an incident, we need this log right now. When you live in the world that we did without the control and as a customer of the centralized observability team, you can't always get a hold of them right as soon as you want. They may not always want to onboard what you need. That is not the world that we want to live in security. More importantly, managing a lot of agents is a really big challenge with the number of machines that we have. Aside from the fact that it consumes tons of CPU, memory, and all the other great things, when you run several agents on hosts, it's just a lot to keep track of in general. Like, it's more software patches you need to deploy, it's more attack surface on your machines, it's more momentum that you need to update these things, and over time, this becomes very difficult and hard to control. Let's talk about some of the ways that we were able to do this and make this better with Cribl. When we were looking at Cribl, we first, probably like many others, thought about Stream. And we quickly, in some of the initial demo calls that we had with the Cribl team, we saw Edge, we were like, oh my God, this is it. And part of the reason why is because, much like Stream, it extends the vendor neutrality of Cribl all the way to the endpoint layer. So now, not only are we able to abstract the connection of logs to our destination SIEM, data lake, and things like that, we can actually abstract the collection of them away from products, right? So this is another challenge with the observability tools of yesteryear, is that, like, the agents are tied specifically to those. So if you get rid of them, you're stuck with all these agents running on your machines that you now need to go get rid of. So vendor neutrality at the agent level was really important to us. More importantly, we wanted the ability to actually explore the data that is out there and understand what we could do with it before we collect it, right? So in the architecture that I was talking about earlier, which I'll show you on the next slide, Given that we were customers of the enterprise observability, we don't even have access to the host to see what logs are there. This compounds the problem because we now don't even know what to ask for. And that just extends the timeline of getting new logs humongously. And another, again, Edge is a really tightly integrated part of the Cribl ecosystem. All of our pipelines, sources, destinations, everything you can do in Stream, you can also do in Edge. And there is definitely some intricacy to where you want to do that, and feel free to come grab me after, and I can talk about that in detail if you'd like to. But point being, you'll need to learn one thing. If you learn pipelines, Edge pipelines are Stream pipelines. You could literally copy and paste them over. They work exactly the same way. So you don't need to get into the game of learning multiple different types of software to manage log collection. It's all the same thing, which is really important for us. Now, the exciting part is let's talk about our journey and how it looks visually, because this is going to be a lot easier to understand. So when we look at the before, if I ask you to take one thing away from this, just look at how much is here and the spaghettiification, if you will, of our legacy log infrastructure, right? So on any particular server, and one thing that this diagram doesn't do a great deal of justice to is, like, in some cases, all of these exist on the same host, right? So we had observability agents, SIEM agents, APM agents, all collecting, in many cases, the same data and sending it 3 different times to 3 different places. So we're paying, as I mentioned earlier, not only for these agents to consume all these resources on my machines to collect these logs, they're going their own way, the same exact log to 3 different places. We're paying to store them 3 times. We're paying for all the software management costs to package these, to keep these updated. Not to mention, this is assuming that the agents aren't awful, which is a horrible assumption. In the case of our classic observability agent, this with heavily utilized Java, extremely heavy resource consumer, tons of software vulnerabilities, needs to be updated all the time, incredibly frustrating. And when you talk about the different systems that we have here, like on Windows machines, it was less bad, if you will, because at least we had an observability agent there. On Linux machines, on-prem and on AWS, we had literally no centralized agent for this whatsoever. We're talking about syslog D config files on 4,000 machines, all managed one by one. I would like to think that to a room of log management professionals, that managing things one by one in config files is probably a bad idea. But if not, I'll emphasize that. Talking about how we've been able to make this look now, we have a fully integrated ecosystem of Cribl Edge and Cribl Stream. We have one agent to rule them all on every single one of our machines on which it's supported. So again, like I said, we have a lot of weird stuff. We have Sun OS and other various Unix maladies. Not going to get into that. But for the 99.9% of our machines now, we have one agent, and it's Cribl Edge. We have complete control over this entire ecosystem for security purposes from end to end. So one of the really great stories that I like to tell is that now my team in security has control over logs and complete visibility from end to end, from the second that we generate them on endpoints until the second that we deliver them in our destination SIEM and data lake. We can do anything we need to do with them in transit. We can filter them. We can transform them. And we can do all of this wherever it makes the most sense in our architecture to do this. So in many cases, there may be data that we have no use to even have exist in Stream. We can drop this directly at the edge. We save all those transit bytes on the wire. We save all those processing bytes in Stream. It's a tremendous, integrated and really efficient log management strategy that we've been able to get to. And we were able to do it really quickly, actually. So the Cribl team was fantastic in helping us do this. We've only been Cribl customers for a little over a year. We deployed 8,000 edge nodes in a little over 3 months. So it was not what I would call easy, but Cribl made it as easy as it could be given the scale of this deployment. Specifically on log onboarding, I had mentioned some of the difficulties that we had with this earlier on, and this is one of the really most exciting things, aside from, of course, the diagram looks great, we have less agents running, all that great jazz, right? But the really important thing as a security professional is how this impacts the overall process of getting data to where it needs to go. Previously, getting new logs in the mechanisms that I had shared took over 60 days. And this is 5+ different teams involved, big impact to the application teams that maintain the actual infrastructure that we need to get the logs from. Lots of people involved, very human effort, very manual, and very distributed. With Cribl Edge, we now, our team, the team that manages Cribl, can go in on any edge node and teleport, similar to how you can do on Stream and other Cribl resources, and explore all the files that are there. From there, we can make informed decisions about the files on the machines that we want to collect, where they are, what they look like, how big they are, where we want them to go, and we can come up with a game plan before we even touch them. Then, when we know what we have and we know what we want to do with it, we can write the pipelines, we can think about conceptually what we want to do in Stream, how we want to abstract pieces on Edge, and then we collect the logs. Once we have the logs in our ecosystem, now we're in Cribl and we're ready to go. We can process them and we can normalize them the same way you would with any other log in Cribl, and we can get them to where they need to go. This process, I had mentioned earlier, used to take 60 days. Depending on how urgent it is, we can get this done in less than 60 minutes. If we have a log that we need to collect, it's a relatively straightforward job, not a big pipeline involved. It could take even less time. The way that Cribl is composed, especially in Edge, is entirely hierarchical and organized by fleets. We can apply descendant policy across our entire organization in a few minutes. Talking again and just closing the loop on some of the benefits that we've been able to get from this journey, I had mentioned end-to-end visibility and control. Cannot emphasize enough how important this was for the security ecosystem in our environment. We've got rapid and efficient data onboarding. We can do it, one person can drive this entire thing from end to end, which is really big. I had mentioned application teams were impacted by the old mechanism. Again, this is partly due to the challenges that I had laid out. Like, we don't have access to these systems. We don't know what's there. So we used to have to ask application teams, where are your logs? What's in them? How can we get them? What are your servers? How can we identify them? All this, we are empowered internally now to do all of this discovery exercise ourselves. And we have complete control along the entire path. And again, in security, speed is key. As we talk about the future, we've now, like I mentioned, gotten this done, and we are on the downswing of Cribl implementation, and we're kind of in steady state at this point. And for a year in, I never thought we would be where we are now. But we're ready to talk about some of the exciting other integrations in Edge that we are going to take advantage of in the near future. One of the really cool things about Edge, if you've attended any of the Cribl Search presentations this week, is that being a part of the Cribl portfolio, it's integrated with all of the Cribl services. So this includes Cribl Search. This also includes Cribl Lake. So in Cribl Search, you can directly analyze telemetry data on endpoints without actually needing to transport it to Stream. So this may be difficult to grasp, but I have a really good slide coming up that will help emphasize this. Again, in security, usually we want the data that we want in our SIEM. There's a lot of data that exists in our environment that security teams are operational teams in a way, if you will, too. There's a lot of data out there that we sometimes want, but we don't really want to pay for this in our SIEM. Perfect example is our vulnerability management agent, right? So our vulnerability management team, again, when you have as many nodes as we have, you're going to have nodes that don't register or encounter issues or other things like that. And our teams need to troubleshoot that, but I really have no need to centralize 8,000 plus VM detection agent logs just for them to figure out that someone set the proxy variables incorrectly on a system. So with Cribl Search and Cribl Edge, what we're able to do is define where these data sources exist on our nodes. In Cribl Search, our users can go in there and query it, and Cribl Search will just orchestrate this search on our edge nodes and go examine the log, return only the necessary entries back to the cloud in a really efficient way. When we talk about how this looks beforehand, I mean, this is a pretty straightforward diagram of how log collection works, the old way, if you will. We need to collect this log and go through the process that I described, which is now significantly easier. But the big downside there is that we still need to send it somewhere and pay for it. When we talk about what this looks like now that we have migrated to Cribl Search, we can just go grab this log. We can say, I want you to go look in this log file on these machines, and Search does this all for us. There's no transportation necessary. There's actually no predefinition even necessary. All you need to know is where the file is, and Cribl will take care of the rest. Want to emphasize again some of the really key takeaways from our journey with Cribl on this project. Avoid adding more agents by integrating our existing tools. So I say this all the time, and my folks in the row here will probably appreciate this, right? But I'm not crazy, I swear. And the reason why I know I'm not crazy is because I tested 4 different SIEMs this year, and I've deployed 0 new agents. And you can clap if you want, save it for the end, it's no worries, but we're really avid believers in the Cribl methodology when it comes to pipelining, and we are also big believers in sharing. So look forward later this year to some of our edge pipelines that we were able to develop getting contributed to the Pack dispensary. And I can tell you, please, I would love if you have questions about some of the tools that we did this in, come grab me afterwards, because we have a ton of lessons learned from doing this. What we found would surprise many, I think. For something as simple as a Windows log, it's incredible how many different ways our different SIEM tools can expect it. Was one of the really big things that I learned this year especially. But talking about acceleration of security operations again, we are completely empowered from end to end. We have all the access to the data that we need at every point along the journey. We can do whatever we need to do to the data. We can get it to whatever format we need. We can reduce as much as we need to wherever we need to. And we have the control to do what we need to do to keep our company safe. And with that, I will say thank you.
Anyone have any questions? Anyone? Whoa.
Please.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I'll go over here.
Yeah, so excellent question. The question, in case everyone didn't hear, was did we get pushback from teams who were uncomfortable with us having the access that we have to explore different things on the machine? So partially, yes. I mean, this is the benefit of being security, is that I can say, I'm security, I need this access. That's really not the great answer, though. What you can do in Cribl, Cribl by default doesn't run as root on Linux machines, so you can control to a reasonable degree actually what files it can access. We do this in our environment with systemd override files because, to your point, like, again, as much as I want to just say, oh, I'm security, I can have whatever I want, that is not great because there are sensitive files on our machines that have secrets and other things. I didn't say that, but really it should not be, but it is. I don't necessarily want security analysts to have access to that information if they don't need to. There are ways of controlling it other than just giving complete access to the entire file system.
How did you find the resource usage of this agent compared to the other ones you were replacing?
It's not that bad. The part of it, like I mentioned, is that one of the agents that we replaced was so bad that anything was going to be a net positive. Cribl it's not really a resource hog in our environment. Now, you do need to be careful, like with great log collection capability comes great potential for CPU usage. We should patent that one. But you do need to be careful, particularly with partitioning how you collect logs on edge nodes. So one problem that we have in our environment is application teams can kind of write their logs wherever they want, and it's up to us to go clean up the mess. So collecting things like Apache logs across 4,000 Linux servers actually becomes reasonably difficult because they can be so many places. So it did take some effort to tune exactly what paths all these files can exist in a way that's efficient. But at the end of the day, I mean, on typical machines, unless they're really, really small, like 2-core, 2 gig Linux machines, we typically see 5-ish% CPU usage and a couple hundred megs of memory. So not bad and reasonable in consideration with any other typical agent. Yes. Oh, sorry.
What is the right way to ingest Windows event logs?
I can tell you how we do it, and I can tell you what you may encounter, right? So we ingest our Windows event logs to Cribl in XML and then convert them to JSON at the edge. Part of the reason for this is because collection from XML is drastically faster on Windows and uses less CPU than to collect it directly from into JSON. This has to do with the Windows APIs involved and other technical intricacies. But the really important thing there is Windows event logs actually are awful in XML format because they contain humongous blocks of text. Like anybody ever see a Windows 4624 login event? It's like, this is a login event, and this is every possible way that this log can be expressed. It's the same text that gets written in every log. So you lose that if you gain not having that, I should say, if you convert it to JSON. More importantly, JSON is just way easier to work with. I don't know about you, I hate XML. But the short answer is JSON is usually the best way. What you will encounter, though, particularly in the C market, is that everybody wants the JSON a slightly different way. Like some want it in snare format, some want it in NXLog format. The beauty of Cribl is that it's easy to get it there, but if you're the first one to do it, there is a little bit of work involved.
So for what you're doing...
Oh, I'm sorry. The microphone is going around. I'll get to you next. Yes, please.
So for what you're doing with Edge, do you have the ability to also execute code, for example, Python, PowerShell, Bash, etc., to collect specific kinds of other data outside of just log files?
The short answer is there are hacks, if you will, in Cribl that you can do to do that. We don't really have a need for it. So you can use exec functions on Cribl, both in Stream and in Edge, to execute arbitrary code. For security reasons, I really don't recommend doing that unless you have to. We have not encountered a situation yet where we couldn't collect something from an edge node for that reason. To that point, I'm just thinking logically about situations where that might occur. Like if you had a system where you had to actually initiate some kind of call to retrieve the events, we would do that with a REST collector or something else in Stream. We wouldn't really typically do that on Edge.
So I have a bit of a pitfall that we had with Edge, in particular around Windows and metrics collection.
Yep.
At Linux. You got to be very careful of what you collect in matrix. Like you don't really need everything.
Yep.
The other thing you need to be careful of, and we ran into this, is Edge used to use, and it still in some cases does use, PowerShell to gather some of the metrics collection. And if you're watching PowerShell for any reason, you get yourself caught in a loop and it goes really bad. So be on the lookout for that if you're collecting those logs.
Yeah, we ran into a related issue even with log collection. So Cribl Edge, we've been using it for a while now, but they have introduced a lot of new mechanisms, particularly to collecting from the Windows event log. They are using a different Windows API now, but the older one that they were using, we ran into the same issue where we were running into a circular problem of getting logs related to Cribl getting logs. I mean, it consumes a lot of resources on the host. You can deal with this in Cribl, of course. But where possible, we do try and avoid that. And using the newer mechanism in Cribl, it's a lot better. Oh, we've got a question in the back, it looks like. I can hear you. Yep.
When we started collecting PowerShell events for all like 2,600 devices, we watched our credit consumption absolutely skyrocket. Now I actually quiet. Sorry, guys. Absolutely skyrocket. And what we were trying to avoid is where are the security gaps in not collecting PowerShell logs. I heard you mention searching in place. We set up a disk pool as a destination in Cribl Edge, where it's sending just those PowerShell logs to a disk pool for X amount of compressed data for X amount of days. Were you guys doing that, or were you searching directly off of like your just storage on the host until essentially it rolls over, or how did you guys balance that need?
So this is great. I didn't think when I had a session that I would learn something by delivering a session. So actually, that's a fantastic idea, and I never thought of that, right? Because one of the limitations right now in Cribl Search is that you cannot search into like EVTX files, right? EVTX files are binary objects stored on Windows, so there isn't a really easy way to decompose them. I'm 100% going to do exactly what you just said, though, because that's a great idea. But to your question, yeah, you can search files. So the file needs to actually exist. Now, what you can do, what this gentleman is emphasizing right here, and with the limitation that I had mentioned, you can't search EVTX files because they're binary objects, but what you can do is use Cribl to collect it and then put it back to a file on the file system and then search it. So that's a cool idea. I would have to think about that in practice because you will get billed for credits to consume it in Cribl.
Yeah, and that was kind of like the crossroads you were trying to find, where's that kind of even ground of what you're collecting from Windows event perspective, so you're not missing anything, but also not over collecting for a bunch of like repetitive PowerShell scripts that are just continuously running on your devices that are just eating up tons of data that you just otherwise don't need. And where can you filter that out or drop it using your pre-processing pipelines? So
yeah, we use a defense in depth strategy, of course, also. So like we try and divert some of that into EDR where possible to avoid collecting it unless we have to. But when you need to collect it, the facilities are there. Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess we're going to pay the bill. Yeah, that's the trouble that we're running into. So.
Exactly, yep. Lots of questions. I love this. Great interactive audience.
Hi, thank you for presentation. How are you managing your disconnected edge nodes today?
Disconnected edge nodes. So we actually just recently deployed Cribl Outpost. This is a great new feature. So when this feature first came out, we were kind of thinking like, what are we going to do with this? But again, given how many nodes we have and how big of an AWS presence we have, application teams are kind of free to configure their instances however they want. Outpost was a great solution for this because it allows us to restrict, minimum, absolute bare minimum port. So like Cribl Cloud, where Cribl Hybrid Cloud environment requires a pretty non-standard port, it's 4200. A lot of our environments ran into issues where that wasn't permitted. We set up an Outpost and we use it to hairpin all the traffic to 443. So we don't have any unmanaged edge nodes as a result anymore.
Okay, but I was trying to imply if, let's say, I have an agent on an Active Directory domain controller and suddenly it stops sending logs, how are you monitoring that agent?
I see. So like dead host detection. Yeah, so we do that partly in SIEM. Today, it's a little bit more of a manual process than we would like, but we are working on automating that with some of the newer tooling out there.
Okay.
There isn't, I don't work for Cribl, so I can't issue the authoritative answer for this. I'm not aware of a native Cribl solution today that 100% addresses that in our environment. So we do it in a combination of different tools that we have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
you. What processing do you do on the edge versus on stream, and how do you balance that? And why do you put stream in between edge and the SIEM if you could do it on the edge itself?
Excellent question. I'm going to answer the first part first. Why do we still use stream? So we still use stream because it allows us to reduce the number of connections that we need to make out of our environment to SaaS. So all of our security solutions, both SIEM, Data Lake, and all the other tools that we're looking at are third-party SaaS solutions. So I would much rather have a proxy, if you will, for managing that data, get to where it needs to go, than having to manage it on all of my nodes and manage all the necessary connections out of my network to do that. More importantly, again, like even Cribl Edge is much easier to manage than the tools that we were. But if you need to make a change to your destination, you need to apply it to all 8,000 of your nodes, which does take a long time. So doing it in stream is faster. To answer the question of like, what's the better practices that we have learned along where to do transformation in stream versus edge, we try and do lightweight processing like conversion of XML to JSON, like I said, at the edge, partly just because that results in such a large event compression on the edge, and it avoids sending a lot of data over the wire. But we prefer doing drop at the edge where possible because it's a relatively lightweight function that doesn't impose a big CPU burden on edge nodes. So like examples, I had mentioned Apache, right? So Apache in our environment is flooded with health checks from like AWS load balancers. We'll periodically contact the applications hundreds of times a second to make sure they're still alive. That's a really great thing that you can drop at the edge. You don't pay for it in stream, and it imposes very little burden on the edge nodes themselves. So things like that.
All right. Any other questions, or we can catch up with Sal afterwards? Okay. One more.
Please.
You brought up Outpost. We have an operational technology environment where, here we go again, sorry guys, I'm going to try not to yell at you this time, where we do not allow outside access to the internet. I don't know if you guys have any sort of network segmentation or partitioning that you utilize, but one of the things we are looking to do is how do we take those edge collected logs out of those operational technology environments without opening up our firewalls to the wider internet so they can communicate for config changes, updates, et cetera, right? So
Yep.
Have you guys used Outpost or anything like that?
Yeah, Outpost is the answer that you're looking for.
Okay.
We're using it for that exact same reason.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
No, that was more just confirmation. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Sal, for sharing all this knowledge and being so gracious with your time.